So glad you're here. This is good. This is good. Daniel, this is fun. We're excited to hear your story. But before we jump into it, we have some people have won some things, so we don't want to miss this. We had a raffle to give away some of Daniel's books, and so Daniel, you want to read our winners for today?
Absolutely. It's so we've got Kathy Dickerson, online attender, Lorraine Gould, the Aurora campus, Brett Maple at the DeKalb campus, and here at the St. Charles campus, Lisa Kelly.
All right. If you have won, we will be mailing those books to you, so you don't have to worry about trying to find where they're going to be today, but you'll get that very soon. Well, Daniel, I want to start just by kind of getting an overview, getting to know you real quick. We're going to do a lightning round of questions. So let's start with this. What is your name?
So my real name is Khosrow Daniel Nayeri, and Daniel's actually an alias.
Khosrow. So you got to clear your throat.
Yeah, you have to
do that one.
You got
to roll an R. So you let us call you Daniel for simplicity. Thank you. And where were you born?
Tehran, Iran.
Okay. And where do you live now?
Jersey City.
Very similar to Tehran, right?
Very. Yeah.
Tell us about your family.
Well, I have a lovely wife. We met in college, and we have a 9-year-old son named Gideon.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. If we get a chance to try Iranian food, what do you recommend?
So the hamburger of Iran, like the big staple that you get, most nights is a kebab, right? So a kebab is basically any skewered meat that is cooked over an open flame, served over really buttery rice with like a seared tomato, right, and a bunch of like sides. So if you get the classic is the ground beef, all kinds of awesome spices, seared over an open flame, you cannot go wrong.
All right. Yeah. What do you do for a living?
I write books for kids.
Yes. And when you were growing up, what was your favorite book?
The Hobbit.
See, this is why we invited this guy. We're already friends. So if you are looking for a good book, I highly recommend Daniel's book. So the way we kind of came across this, even kind of the way we got Daniel here, is I was in a bookstore and I saw this and I was like, that cover looks really cool. My wife and I looked at it and we're like, well, a story about refugees, that's kind of interesting. That'd be a good thing for our kids to read about. And so we picked it up, and I will tell you, this blew me away. We laughed, we cried, we stopped and had good conversations. It's really, really fantastic. And I'm not the only one to think that. It's won a ton of accolades. If you look up the best books of the year list, basically from anywhere from last year, it ends up on there. So it's doing really well. And there is more in this book than we're going to be able to cover in this interview. So if you're curious about his story, it's really good. It's a beautiful, beautiful book as well. Well, let's start with your life in Iran before you came here. Because I'll be honest, so I picked this up, realized it's a refugee story, and in my mind, I had kind of the typical, like, this is what's happened. Some place is really awful, right? Like, it's war and violence and desperate situations, and someone leaves a place that's really hard, and hopefully they end up someplace that's better in some way. And in a lot of ways, your story kind of flipped that on the head for me, because it sounded like life in Iran was actually pretty good for your family. So describe what that was like for you.
Sure. Yeah, life was very good, right? So my mom and my dad. So my mom was a doctor in Iran, had her own practice. My dad was a dentist. He had his own, and they lived in Isfahan. Isfahan is like far from like the burned out buildings you will see on TV. It is one of the garden capitals. It's gorgeous. There's tree lined colonnades everywhere. And they lived in a beautiful house. The house, had all sorts of, the good life, right? And the unique thing about this house, I used to call it the house with the birds in the walls, because my dad had gotten it into his head to make an atrium between my room and my sister's room. So imagine one wall in each of our rooms is entirely glass, and in between there's a big atrium with all these potted trees and birds. Like he loved exotic birds, and so you could look in there. I used it to spy on my sister, to be honest, because you could go straight through and see what my sister was up to. But it, it was a lovely house, and she had her whole family, and generations going back. So there was the family farm was like 1,000 acres and full of pomegranate groves. So that's where they would picnic in the weekends, and Yeah, it was a very stable situation. It was very good for her.
And religiously speaking, what was your background?
Well, so Iran is 96.5, I think, percent Muslim and Shiite Muslim, which we sort of colloquially called like the fundamentalist kind. And so, and it's about less than 1%, 1.5% of anything else. So, so she was a very devout Muslim. My mom was, in particular, a Quranic scholar. She, you know, a lot of times people will be culturally whatever they are and not read the text. She was deep in the texts and particularly devout.
Yeah, and your father?
Particularly not devout. I think he takes everything sort of a little less seriously, much more of the Rumi school. So Rumi is a poet that some people may have heard of from the Sufism is an offshoot of Islam. It's more of a, it's kind of the hippie version. It's very chill. He's that. He's you know, much more.
Yeah. And within Islam, your family had kind of a special status. Explain what that was.
Sure. So like, well, not to go into this, like all the history, but there's a difference, of course, as we know, between the Sunnis and the Shi'is, and quite a difference. They don't get along as much. And so the difference began all the way back when Muhammad, the prophet, dies. And there's a question of succession. Like, how do you go on with this thing? And there's, you know, one group was like, we're not going to just pick the best person for the job to be, you know, our next leader. It's got to be the bloodline. The bloodline of this person is very powerful and important and holy. And so, and that's where the offshoot happens. The Shiites are the ones who decide that that's the way to go, and they're the ones who populate nowadays Iran, Afghanistan, and, you know, half of Iraq. So, so as you can imagine, in Iran, that's something that people really keep track of, right? And the term for it is Sayyid. Sayyid sort of means master. If you've ever seen like an old like Casablanca type movies, there'll always be a guy walking around going, "Yes, Sahib." Sahib is like another way of saying master. It's the same word. So he's saying, "Yes, master." And yeah, so Sayyid means that it's a form of social cachet. It means you're more holy, that people would want you to pray over them more. There's it's a bit of like an aristocracy kind of experience.
Yeah, and both of your parents are Sayyid.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's doubly rich in your family. So things are good for you guys.
She's doing good.
You're doing well. Fast forward, okay? So we're going to kind of skip some part of the story here and compare this with your life when you come here to the U.S. and you land in Oklahoma. How old were you when you got here?
So seven,
okay.
8. Yeah.
And describe what life was like in Edmond, Oklahoma.
There were no atrium full of exotic birds in the walls of the apartment complex. Yeah, so she gave up everything, right? So she's disinherited. She's sort of disowned. All that kind of wealth and status goes away, as it would if you're a refugee. So, you know, relocating to, you know, an apartment complex, sort of the poorer side of town. You know, it's sort of all the things you'd expect, right? She's, you know, struggling for work, struggling to figure out English. You know, if you're a single mom, my dad didn't come with us. So if you're a single mom working 2 jobs, you know, there's less supervision for the kids. So, you know, just more, you know, it's kind of a stereotype, right? Like the poor kid walks home, easy target for the you know, the knuckleheads.
Yeah. If you pick up Daniel's book, you'll kind of get kind of the inside experience of a kid who's going through that, because the book is written from the perspective of his childhood self. And so you'll get kind of the stress and the challenge of going into that situation. But in the book, you describe what you consider one of your favorite parts of the day. Can you tell us about that?
Sure, yeah. So like as I said, you know, my mom was working 2 jobs, and it's, you know, sort of they're hard menial labor kind of jobs, and we were so we were kind of left to our own. I joked that, like, you know, like Nintendo was my babysitter, and we you know, but when my mom would get home, she really had this love of cooking and a memory of it, because it really connected her to Iran. And so she would get home at like 7:30, 8, and immediately go into the kitchen. This is a very productive human being. And would start, you know, baking bread from scratch. She made her own yogurt. It was just a gigantic feast of, you know, sort of the food that we were used to. And we would all sit down. It was always a late dinner, and it was sort of just not only the sort of the one time we were all together, but it was also the one time we were kind of, you know, just eating well. Like, you know, you start off when you come and you're kind of like, oh, you know, you discover the miracle of things like Pringles, for example, which are all the same shape. It's shocking. And if you ever want to see, like peanut butter, we discovered peanut butter, which at first tastes just like it's glue, it's shutting your mouth down. But and then you know then the jam hits, and all of a sudden, like that's how to get you know, you keep a kid away from peanut butter for 8 years, and then hand him a peanut butter sandwich. That's how to really build an addict. But so, you know, so at first, I'm sitting there going like, you brought peanut butter sandwiches? I only have, but those dinners really made me realize that what my mom was giving us in the best way she could was homemade food, right? That's like nowadays, to say like handmade yogurt is like the gourmet thing. It's not like, but back then it was like, but they have yogurt that comes in tubes now. It's called Go-Gurt. Mom, what are you doing? We can be purchasing this. So yeah, it really was an insight into not only her value of giving that to us, but it was a sort of wealth. It was a small piece of what we used to have.
Yeah. As we go along, you're going to find out that Daniel's mom really is incredible, and she's kind of one of the heroes here of this story. Just as an aside, just so you guys know. Right now, we've all been paying attention to the news. There is another kind of refugee situation going on with folks from Afghanistan who are displaced and going to be relocated. Estimates are, you know, somewhere in the 37,000 range are going to be coming to the United States over the course of, you know, the fall and winter here. And those of you who've been around at Christ Community for a while, you know that at the end of each year, we do a big year-end gift where we try to meet some needs in our local community or with our international impact partners, and try to raise money, usually, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars that we can contribute to those things. And we're going to be announcing our project for this year in the upcoming month, but I want to give you a sneak peek because one aspect of that project is going to be partnering with World Relief to actually help resettle some of the refugees from Afghanistan who are going to be in the Chicago area. So that's going to be really exciting. You're going to want to look forward to that. So, Daniel, we've got this contrast between life in Iran and life in Oklahoma, and we've got to figure out why someone would go from this to this. And that story kind of starts for your family in England. Tell us about your trip to England. Why were you there?
Sure. So, sorry, it's complicated, but like divorces in Iran are complicated. But and my grandmother was separated from my grandfather on my mom's side, and so she was exiled to the UK, which sounds wild. But she was allowed to take one of her kids, which was the youngest daughter, my youngest aunt, and at the time she was 11. But she grows up over the years and wants to marry this great Englishman, and they're going to have a wedding. So. We end up going as a family to help, and it was going to be a longer trip to sort of see them after a long while. So it was a good month that we were in the UK.
Yeah. And while you're there, your sister gets injured. You want to tell us about that one?
Sure. Yeah. Buckle up. This is bloody. So she's 6 at the time and is sort of in a daycare playground situation, and knuckleheads being knuckleheads everywhere. Nowhere has a monopoly on that. There's a little kid who sort of goes, does the like, come here, I'm gonna tell you a secret. And sister, kind of gullible, goes over to hear the secret, and he says, you know, like put your finger in the door jamb so I can tell you the secret. That's not a prerequisite for knowing a secret. That you don't have to do that in case you were ever asked to do that. And so he slams the door, and it severs my sister's finger from the pinky. This ends well, I promise. But for now, not well. Everything is bloody. Blood everywhere, blood in the sink. And they call my mother. My mother is, of course, rushes over and thankfully has the wherewithal, put the pinky in a little bit of ice, and they go to the hospital and they sew it all together. Kind of a weird aside to tell you about, except we get back to my grandmother's home, and the idea, my sister's just been like, she just had her finger sewn back on. Like, this is a traumatic experience. This is not nice. And she's 6, and so they sort of tell her, go in the bedroom, like lay down, just kind of, they're hoping she'll take a nap, wake up a little bit, relieved, but they don't quite know what's gonna happen. And so what happens is, instead, about 20, 30 minutes later or whatever, she walks out, and she's sort of just this like bounding and joyful little girl, like nothing's gone wrong. And the adults in the room are, I'm 3 years old at this point, so like I'm like barely sentient. I'm eating the cat food. This is something people told me about. And so the adults are kind of like, well, this is wild. Like the expectation is at least like maybe she's processing it, what's gonna happen, but she's not even acknowledging it. And so they said, so what happened? Did you take a nap? And here I have to pause for a second again and tell you that this is the part of the story where I'm gonna say a bunch of things that sound improbable and are in fact miraculous. Or you can also choose not to believe it. But it's what happened, and it's what I describe it. She literally says, this man appeared at the foot of my bed, and I was crying, and I said, and I told him what happened, and he said, everything is gonna be okay. You're mine now. And my grandmother, of course, first checks the room, make sure like the windows were locked and stuff, and then they were upper floor, no problems there. And so, but she says, and she kind of teases this out a little bit. My grandmother at the time, had converted over the decade she was there to Christianity, and so she's asking, because you have to understand, in Iran, like there are no just like random posters of Jesus. There are no books with pictures. It's not like the visual iconography of like Jim Caviezel movies are not present. So when she's describing this person and describing what he's saying, and some of which is mapping to the Bible, like my grandmother is going, I think you met Jesus. I think, and my sister, 6 years old, very headstrong, goes, okay, then yeah, I'm a Christian now. I'm like grandma. My mom's just like, my mom's jaw's on the floor, of course, at this point.
What does your mom do with that? Like, how does she respond to her daughter saying this?
Just unbridled panic. Well, the context is, you have to understand, so in Iran, if you convert from Islam to Christianity or Judaism, this is a capital crime. Like, when I say capital crime, I don't mean like people don't invite you to parties. I mean, you get accused in front of a religious court. If found guilty, you get killed, and that's the end of that. And at the time also, Iran had just had its revolution, and there was a secret police force. Ominously, they're called the Committee. And even if you want to hear it in Farsi, it's the Comité. And the Comité is a terrifying word for me. But they really have the city under their thumb, and you don't know who's working with the secret police. So there's this very culture of sort of suspicion. You want to keep to yourself. You don't want to talk too much to your neighbors. You really don't. It's a very difficult time. And so like a little 6-year-old walking into her school and telling the teacher, like, oh yeah, we went to England, and I ate peanut butter, and also I'm a Christian, gets you killed. It can't happen. So she's really just trying to like shush a 6-year-old. Not gonna happen. Doesn't usually, but.
But she keeps digging, right? So your mom not only tries to figure out what's going on with her daughter, but actually tries to figure out what's going on with Jesus. Right. How does that work?
So to her credit, she really engages with this moment, right? Like her daughter is like really sincere in this situation, and of course her own mother is like saying, you should look at this. And so she does. She opens the Bible, and here's where, when I mentioned, she was a Quranic scholar, it's actually kind of important because when she reads the Bible, and a lot of people can, who are sort of culturally anything else, and they can say, oh, it's just full of nice stuff. There's some bland niceties in here, the golden rule, and be nice to the poor, and these are all, we all kind of agree, nice, good stuff. But because of her background, and she really had read the Quran, and at that point was reading the Bible, she was really seeing the differences. She was really starting to dive down into, okay, so what are the claims of Jesus? What is he saying? Because it's not sort of easily compatible with everything else. He doesn't say like, I am the way, the truth, and the light, and also, check out some other stuff. And so there's an exclusivity that is demanded there, and she really reckoned with that and converted as well. So like after the wedding, much after the wedding, like it wasn't the same day, she goes, at same church, she was baptized and converted on the same trip.
Wow. So it just kind of raises the question that the stakes are so high. So she's got to go back to Iran, and not only with a 6-year-old who claims she's a Christian, but now she herself is a follower of Jesus. You got to ask the question, like, why would you do that? Like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Why did she do it?
Well, that's where we live. That's where, so on some level, she had to go back home, but on another, the underground church was operating at that time in Iran. It's still, I'll keep that part. It's operating in Iran at that time. And so, and these are like sort of missionaries, got a heart for this, and are preaching to Muslims. And again, preaching to Muslims, that's a capital crime. So, and you can imagine, how do you decide who to preach to? Like, you can't just walk up to somebody. They may have a very negative reaction to what you just said, and then you're sort of done. So, it's something that's very challenging. It has to be handled with care. And my mom went and wanted to support that and help the underground church. And so for 2 years while we were there, they meet in basements, and they try to find people who might be open to it and preach.
Wow. Yeah. What does your dad think of all of this?
Oh, he thinks like a mania has taken his wife, and that she needs to snap out of it as quickly as possible, right? Like he would very much like this phase to end, and sort of at first thinks, it's a way to connect with her mother maybe, or, he's sort of psychologizing it or whatever, and would, so he's sort of putting up with it, but very much resistant.
Yeah. Eventually, the secret police, they find out about your mom.
Right.
What happens then?
Yeah, when the secret police find you and want to talk to you, it's like, you're in the market, white van pulls up, you get thrown in the van, which is what happened. And she gets taken to a safe house where they interrogate her, and we sort of skip over the gruesome parts and get to the upshot, which is that she has a week to tell them the names of the people in the underground church, or they're going to kill her and her kids. And then honestly, what they do is they leave the door open, and you walk out of the safe house in the middle of a neighborhood, and you just go home, right? They don't have to keep you in custody. They have the whole city they know where you live. They know where you are. They know, you just wait a week, and they'll find you again. So she walked back home, and this is where, so from my perspective, I get picked up from school by my dad. We all, we're in the car. We go home, and my mother, we sort of see her in an complete, shock and panic and hysteria, trying to pack. No tickets, nothing, no visas, nothing, but we have to get out somehow. So she's just throwing things into a suitcase, and we drive you to the airport.
And to, there's a ton of details. Like I said, there's so much in the book that we can't cover. But you guys end up first in the UAE, United Arab Emirates, and then in Italy. You end up there. and you're in, essentially, they've kind of redone a hotel to just kind of house a bunch of refugees that are there. And you're there for a long time. You know, you're there in this whole process is years of trying to figure out and waiting to figure out where you're gonna be. So tell us a little bit about what that's like. Actually, a couple of stories that I think are kind of, you know, telling details. Tell us about Hot Dog Day.
Sure. So real quick, like the way these refugee camps sort of worked, these are like the not nice parts of Italy. There's no postcard of this like sort of brutalist cement building, very few windows, landfill in the back. And the way they needed to be built, because at the time in the 80s, Eastern Europe having a tough time, a lot of people are literally walking over the Alps and you know, walking into Italy. And so there was this feeling at the time, as it might feel to have just like people randomly showing up, of trying to do right by these people. I think there was a very good heart there, but also trying to make sure they're kind of on their way, right? This is a stop, but you got to keep going. And so, you know, the quick version is, you know, we're in the cafeteria and on the plate, you're kind of expecting pasta, right? It's the cheapest thing to make in Italy. It's like 11 cents for a bag of noodles. And there's this sort of a hot dog on the plate, like no bun, hot dog, just hot dog. And this guy in front of me goes, "What is this?" And the dude in the cafeteria goes, "This is American food. You need to get used to American food." And so, I came and I realized y'all eat it with a bun and mustard, and it's much better. Much better than just the boiled hot dog. It was also boiled. I have opinions on that. But the idea there really was, you know, this is a station on your path toward somewhere else. And so, yeah, it was sort of the first vision of, oh, okay, like I'm not this little, you know, the son of the dentist in Isfahan who, you know, gets just like presents all the time and things like that. Like that was a real shift in, okay, we're sort of, I mean, the term for refugees is the global homeless. So, you know, that was an interesting moment.
Yeah. The other aspect, the other story I'd love to hear about is how your mom approached your education, your sister's education, because you're you know, displaced for a while, and that could easily stall that. But she wasn't content to just wait around. What did she do?
Yeah, so usually just people, there's not really a solution, and people let it sit. My mom does not sit, and so she searched for weeks and weeks and found a family that had been homeschooling. We knew we needed an English language, so it was an English-speaking family, and they were in homeschooling. They were thankfully. So what she was looking for was a family that had a kid my sister's age. And they have workbooks, right? And it's 66 workbooks, 6 subjects, 11 workbooks that you go through the year. And it's the last month of the year, so they've kind of done most of them. And my mom goes, you know, it takes about an hour and a half to commute to their house via bus. And on the way, there's this little novelty, like, stationery shop. And she goes in and buys what I have to believe was like a novelty eraser, because it's the size of this succulent plant here. It's like gigantic eraser. And she literally sits there next to us. We sat in a row. She's got a pile of, you know, 132 books. And she's going in and just erasing answer after answer and then passing it over to my sister or to me. And to this day, she has this sort of welt here on her finger that, you know, is sort of this sign to me anyway of like, wow, to do something like that for a month, I promise, it sounds sort of easy. It's a rote job that will eventually become a real task. It's a real painful thing to do. And but it really signals to me just this sort of indefatigable aspect of her. And so that's how I did the first grade, and my sister did the fourth.
The love and the tenacity of your mom is incredible. I like how you describe her in your book. Let me read this. You say, "The legend of my mother is that she does not stop. And if you don't stop, you're unstoppable. I bet if I asked you what's the toughest stuff on earth, you'd say diamonds, but you'd be wrong. You should have said your mom. What do you know that keeps going, is never distracted, never bored, never deterred, Beat up and threatened, sure. Humiliated and ignored often, but never, never stopped. That's right. You get it now. My mom. That's incredible. That's a tribute to your mother right there. But here's the question. How did she get that unstoppable? Where does that kind of tenacity come from?
Yeah, so I mean, I tell this story. It's actually an anecdote from my pastor, Tim Keller, and he tells the story about how you can sort of experience the present and how the difficulty of the present. And it goes like this. It's really quick. It says, imagine I give you a job, right? A windowless room, all cement. You're just putting a widget into a widget, and you're gonna do this for a year, full year, 8 hours a day. And I tell you, at the end of this year, I'm gonna give you $1 billion. And then in the next room, there's another person, and same job, same windowless room, same cement. It's awful job. And they go, and at the end of this year, we're gonna give you $10,000. Well, that guy is gonna spend the year going, what am I doing? What am I doing? That's like the taxes on 10,000. I can't even, I've already spent the 10,000. And the other guy is gonna sit there in that room, just joyfully spending $1 billion on like an island and a Dippin' Dots machine and like whatever. Like, and it's gonna be the fastest year. I promise that one's gonna have the faster year. Same job, same year, same amount of time, better experience. That's the anecdote that's always, I love because, your understanding of what's going to happen is absolutely going to affect how you experience the present.
Yeah.
And my mom has her vision on a very long-term goal.
Yeah. I think this is so profound. What you believe about the future changes how you experience the present. If you believe that there is a hope for you beyond this present moment, here's the thing, I know enough of the stories in this room. I know that some of you might be thinking, well, I'm not a refugee, that wasn't my desperate situation, but for you, you've got something that is a desperate situation. I've talked to people this week, we're talking about the chronic pain that they've been going through for years. I talked to someone who broke up with their fiance and it fell apart and they're heartbroken and they're not sure what's gonna happen next. And people who are going through financial difficulties and broken relationships in their family, they're not sure what's gonna happen. And you look at that present and you say, how am I gonna get through this? And the difference between someone who gets crushed by that and the person who finds the ability to keep going is that vision of the future, is saying, is there something more for me? Is the story going someplace for me? And when you can say there is something glorious and beautiful that God has said you are going to get at the end of this, the $1 billion, it changes everything. It changes everything. And not just about the future, but about the present. That's amazing. This idea of hope is actually tied to the title of your book. It's a title that's cryptic if you don't know where it comes from. So everything sad is untrue. For some of you, you're like, I know exactly where that's from. Others of you are like, where'd you get that? So why don't you tell us
Sure.
where that came from?
Yeah, I'm not a silly person. I understand that there are sad things that are true in this life. I think the title comes from a reference to the Lord of the Rings. I already copped to the, being a nerd to that. And but that book I adored, and there's a moment in it that it's the saddest moment. It's like the most downcast, right? Like Gandalf, the father figure, the wizard, the dude, he's like sacrificed himself. He's died. He's fallen in a pit. And Samwise Gamgee, little guy, is the heart of the whole story. Is just despondent. Like this whole thing is hopeless. And it's at that moment in the darkness it describes that they hear the sound like laughter, and they see that Gandalf has come back. He's alive now, and he's Gandalf. He used to be Gandalf the Grey, now he's Gandalf the White, and everything is amazing. And so Samwise runs to him and asks this incredibly naive question that I just adore. It like feels like this sort of child heart that he says, Gandalf, now that you're back, like, is everything sad going to become untrue? Like, are all the problems going to be fixed? And I loved that question. I loved the idea of it. And I think on a long enough timeline, the answer is yes.
Yeah. That this the broken things of the world will come back together. Let's jump forward a little bit in the story here, back to the U.S. You grew up here, you and your sister, you're here, your mom kind of rebuilds a life for you guys. But then when you turn 18, you've got a decision to make about how you're going to relate to the country of Iran. Tell us about that, and tell us why you made the decision you did.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, at 18, we were minors. So my mom immediately after we left, she got a fatwa on her head, which means basically you're found guilty of without the sort of trial of apostasy. And so she's not allowed back. It's a very serious thing. And so at 18, you kind of you gotta choose because now I'm an adult legally, and so my dad called and there was this real, the sort of the stakes on the phone are, can you ever come back? Can you ever inherit, your grandfather's land? Can you ever, see your grandmother again? All that stuff, even for a visit, right? Like lots of people get to go back to Iran for a visit, and so that's sort of what's hanging over here. But the sort of the catch is you kind of have to either be kind of agnostic or you have to choose Islam. And when you watch my mom, as I did, up close, the why of it is really clear, right? You have this woman who, as we said, had a very, very good life, right? And gave up, money and prestige and cachet and power and just a really stable, experience. Her family, all of those things, gives it up for an extremely rough road. As a single mom, as a refugee, as just being poor, all these things, and you have to ask yourself, like, why? Why in the world would she do this? And you at that point, you really have to go, this lady made the worst trade on the planet, or she didn't. Or what she got in return was more valuable to her than all those things. And in that kind of sincerity, I don't think my mom is nuts. I don't think she made a random trade. I think very clearly, if these claims are true, if heaven is waiting on the other side, if there is a God and he sent his son to die for you, then it has to take over. It has to be worth more than everything else. How could it not be worth more than everything else? It's like, as we said, it's the end of the year. It's gonna be, that has to be it. And so the why of it was fairly simple. And so on the phone it was, yeah, I'm a Christian. And so that stuff sort of goes away.
Yeah. Last question here. My favorite sort of portion of your book, kind of passage in the book, is when you pose a question. The question is, would you rather have a God who speaks or a God who listens? Now that's kind of an evocative question, but I want you to explain what you mean by that.
Sure. So yeah, that's so he's a kid in the story, and he's really trying to explore, as I said in the last part, like why would this person do this? Like, we had horses, for goodness sakes. Why would you leave? And my mother's answer is like, because God, because there's, and so he's struggling with what is that? What is this guy? And so he starts to think about them in these ways, because he starts to also see that everyone he's meeting, his father, even the people who don't profess to, they're all worshiping something. They all have gods, and some of them speak and some of them listen. And what he means by that is, a God who speaks is a God come down the mountain, is a God who writes his words on stone and delivers them to you, is a God of law, is a God who delivers justice and speaks the world into being. But as also, there are other gods who speak, right? And you can have them. Television only ever speaks to you. If you worship beauty, it will only ever tell you ways in which you are, falling short. And so they're all over, in his experience, he's seeing gods who speak. And then he's also saying, well, there's also gods who listen, right? The God who listens, of course, is the God of mercy, the God of love, the God who will dwell inside you and listen and sit with you as you grieve. And then there's also these other gods who listen that are, alcohol will listen forever and give you nothing in return. And so will money, if that's all you pursue. And so he's seeing all this and going, there are gods who speak and there are gods who listen, but there's only one that speaks to your heart and listens, who gives you justice and mercy at the same time, who is law and who is love, who like delivers this like beautiful paradox that that we didn't live up to the law. There was a law, there was a standard, and we didn't live up to it. But he wouldn't let us go. We were too much loved to be abandoned, and so he chose to forgive and take. But forgiveness isn't willy-nilly. Someone's got to pay the price, and so he does.
Yeah.
That contradiction, right? How can you have such a high standard and also love, so deeply? That is what sort of he kind of comes to and realizes that that's what his mother perceived. That's what his mother was pursuing all the way across the planet. So that's what he sort of comes to as well.
Yeah. This is the reason we do this. This is the message, right? The hope that Daniel and his mother found, and the thing that changes everything. It's what we call the gospel. It's the good news that there is a God, and he is both the God who speaks and the God who listens. He's the God who speaks. He made the world. He spoke it into existence and declared over it, this is good, and people are very good, and he invites us into a relationship to partner with him, to know him, to be connected to the source of everything that's worth having, And the tragic story of the world is that each and every one of us, even though we were invited into that, we've all turned away to something else. We've all said, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to go after one of those other gods, one of those other things, because I think it might give me what I need. And when we turn away from God, it's what the Bible calls sin, but it's something that we all experience all the time. We don't need a special word for it. We know that we go after these things, and when we turn away from God, the source of all that's good, that's where all the brokenness of the world comes from. I mean, when you think about it, when you walk away from the source of all joy, you're walking towards pain and suffering. When you walk away from the one who holds the future, you are walking towards hopelessness. When you walk away from the source of justice, what do you get? You get injustice. You walk away from the source of love, you get conflict and division and hate. You walk away from the source of life, and you get death. And so this is where all of us are, and it's where the world is. And so we look at the world and we say, to the God who speaks, do something. Like, bring justice, fix this, banish the evil, get rid of the brokenness. And we want that, we need that. But the problem is when we actually ask him to do that, we turn the mirror on ourselves and we realize, if he got rid of all the things that contributed to the problems of the world, he'd have to do something with me too. And so we're in a tough place. We haven't lived up to that standard. And so that's where that good news comes in, that God didn't want to leave us there. He loved us so much that he actually came and he said, I'm going to fix the problem you can't fix. I'm going to take the burdens on myself. So this is what Jesus was doing. When he stepped into the story, he said, I'm going to bear the burdens, the consequences of you walking away from me, the suffering and the shame and the guilt and the pain. I'm going to put it on my shoulders, including the death that you deserve. I'm going to take it. I'm going to pay that price. So when Jesus is hanging on the cross, this is exactly what he's doing. He's taking all of that so that he could take it from us. And what's even better news is that after that price was paid, Jesus did not stay dead. He rose from the dead. And this is one of those astounding things. You got to decide, am I going to believe it or not? Is this a crazy claim, or is it the absolute truth that changes everything? That Jesus faced death, went through it, conquered it, came out on the other side. And because of that, we don't just have hope that we get to see him again, but that the whole world might be put back together again. Every sad thing will come untrue because death is defeated and he's bringing new life to the world. That's incredible, incredible news. And now Jesus is seated on the throne, and here's what he's saying. He's saying, I'm inviting you to have what I'm offering. And all it takes is for you to say, you know what? I'm done. I'm done running my own life. I'm done pursuing these other things. I can't do it anymore. I need you to forgive me and put me back together, to just put yourself, surrender into his hands. That's how it begins. That's all it takes. And so this is the question. Do you want to experience that? Do you want to know the kind of hope that can get you through the most difficult of times? You want to know the treasure that is worth giving up anything in order to have it. Do you want to know that soul-satisfying love of the God who came and pursued you? There's some of you here who you've never experienced that, but you want to. And today might be the day that you take that first step. It's as simple as this. It's as simple as praying to God and just surrendering and saying, that's what I want, God. And around here, we use a pattern for prayer a lot of times about this. And it's just 3 simple words. It's sorry, thanks, and please. And that's what you say to God. And if you want to do that right now, we're going to pray. And while I pray, if you just want to join in your heart and say those things to God and in your own way, to say, God, I need you. I want to know you. I want to experience that life, forgiveness, and hope that you offer. Go ahead and do that right now. Now let's pray together. God, we want to start off by saying sorry. God, we are sorry. I'm sorry. I've turned away from you. I have pursued everything else in the world. I've done things I know I shouldn't have done. I've failed to do things that I know I should do. I have tried to run my own life, and I have done things for which I'm guilty and ashamed. I am so sorry. God, sorry for what I've done. Go ahead and take a moment, just in the quietness of this moment, to express that to God. Maybe there's particular things you want to say sorry for. Now, God, we want to say thank you. Thank you that you didn't leave us to our own mess. You didn't make us try to figure out how to put it back together. You showed up and you did what was needed, what we couldn't do. Jesus, you came and you gave your life. Thank you. Thank you for paying that price. Jesus, thank you that you rose from the dead so that we could have hope, so that there could be a future. God, thank you. Thank you so much. Go ahead, spend a moment. Offer your thanks to God for what he's done. And God, now we want to say, please. God, please come into my life. Become my Savior, my King. Be the one who sits on the throne. Be the one who's at the center, the one who rescues me. Please offer your forgiveness. Give me your freedom. Welcome me into your family, God. Please give me a hope and a future. Please rescue me. I'm yours. Go ahead in your own way and in your heart. Say that to God. God, we thank you that when we call out to you, when we give ourselves to you, you hear us and you respond and you welcome us in. That each of us who have prayed that prayer are part of your family. And we have a hope and a future. God, is so incredible. We're so thankful for that. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, if you prayed that prayer, maybe for the first time ever, and you surrendered to Jesus and said, I need you, that's a first step in a relationship with God. And we are so excited about that. One of the things we love to do around here at Christ Community is to help people take next steps in their journey with God. Once they have committed to Christ like that, to figure out, okay, what does this mean? Where do we go from here? Because that's just the very beginning of this adventure that you're on. And so what we have for you even today before you leave is a gift. It's something we call a Next Steps packet. It's got some material in there. One thing is a Bible that's in there, some other things that will help you kind of learn some more about your faith and some of the things that you can do to kind of get started on this, get connected about that. We'd love for you to have that. When the service is done here, there's going to be some flags that go up around the room, and at the tables right by those flags are going to be those Next Steps packets. And if you're online, you can actually find those. You can find those electronically. If you go to ccclife.org/nextsteps, we can get one of those to you as well. Please don't leave without getting that gift. Well, let's thank Daniel for sharing his story with us. Really incredible. We're so glad that you're here.
Thank you.